This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Sean Preston.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today, we have a good neighbor on with us, and that is Logan O'Brien of Chasing New York. What's going on, my man?
Not too much. It's a good morning here in Barrie. Appreciate you having me.
No worries, man. Super happy to have you on the show. We've never met before, so I'm pretty curious. Love to dive into it. Had a quick peek on your website, but I also like to come into these blind as well too. Let curiosity lead the conversation.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure. So I am Chasing New York. It's kind of Barrie's first, I'd say, like premier menswear boutique with a more modern touch. We've had some boutiques here in the past, but definitely most of them have been more of an ode to kind of the old school menswear world. So super highly focused on kind of traditional suiting, a lot of three-piece, things like that. Whereas at Chasing New York, I've tried to bring a much more contemporary vision, I think, to the menswear space. So we focus a lot more on kind of casual and business casual, just kind of the way that the world went after COVID. I think even the most professional of services, no one is really wearing a suit, 5 days a week anymore. And if they are, they want a much more comfortable suit. So I've brought in a lot of different kind of stretch fabrics and a ton of business casual stuff to allow people to still dress professional for the office, but not have to be kind of stuck in a, starchy wool or cotton blazer that is just very uncomfy by minimum lunchtime.
100%. I can totally relate to that. I've been in the business world for a very long time, wore a suit for a very long time. And then obviously, just like you said, COVID, same thing happened to me. Also, I switched over from what I was doing. I was selling B2B in the automotive industry for 9 years and dressed absolute to the nines. I was looking good every day, but super uncomfortable. We had a couple of weddings recently we had to go to, and I had to throw the old suit on. I just wear golf pants and a golf shirt now. So I'd be very curious to come and check out what you have in the store.
Yeah, I think, obviously that was quite the norm pre-COVID, right? But I think because everyone was working from home for whether it was a year, 2 years, some even 3, everyone got pretty comfortable wearing, the likes of Lululemon and stuff like that. That is quite comfortable and a little, I guess, still kind of on an upscale front. But in here, I've tried to kind of take a lot of that, I guess, casual-esque feeling of comfortable clothing, but still, bring it to a level of upscale that, even now, 3 years or 4 years post-COVID, you can still show up to the office and feel comfortable, but you're not wearing, Lululemon that kind of looks a little bit more athletic than a little more professional. We have a lot of different fabric styles in here that lend the same comfort as Lululemon, but are obviously in a much higher quality and, typically made out of Europe somewhere. Most of the lines we carry are from Italy, Sweden, Denmark, a little bit of Portugal. And then I've sprinkled in a bit of North American, California, New York, a bit of Canada as well, but mainly the brands in here from Europe.
Well, that's a really good opportunity to segue in, because now you got me uber curious. How do you get into doing something like this?
It's a pretty strange path, if I'm being quite frank. So when I was in undergrad, I was out in Montreal, which is obviously probably Canada's fashion hub, probably the most like Europe of anywhere in Canada.
Totally.
So I've always been into fashion, but that's kind of where I picked up my roots. I used to have a vintage reselling business when I was in undergrad. So it started with vintage clothing, and I did that for about a year or so. But I found there was a much better market in the vintage high-end jewelry and leather goods. So I used to flip luxury watches, shoes, belts, bags, all from the 80s and 90s. Mostly in the high-end designer brands, so Gucci, Louis, Fendi, things like that, where I would travel around to different estate sales, use Kijiji, things like that, to find super underpriced old luxury goods that people were selling for really cheap. And then I set up an online e-commerce platform and just resold stuff for about 3 years, probably through undergrad. I still do a little bit once in a while if I can find a good deal. That market's a little cornered, but yeah, it was fun. I called it like my revolving closet that I could make money on. So
Nice.
that's kind of where I started in terms of like fashion business. After I finished my undergrad, I went and got my MBA out at Dalhousie in Halifax.
Nice.
And kind of planned to get into fashion brand strategy, but couldn't find a good way into the fashion landscape in Canada. There's not a whole lot of avenues from like a Canadian MBA to like a European fashion house or even some of the big US fashion houses. Most of them revolve around being in Canada, and that wasn't really what I was interested in being in. So I ended up getting into finance, and I found myself on Bay Street for almost 3 years, and I was doing a couple different roles in lower middle market investment banking. So helping entrepreneurs either grow through acquisition or helping them divest of their business and run a sell side process with them. So kind of an odd start. And a lot of people are very curious as to how someone goes from, investment banking in Toronto to opening up a store here in Barrie. But I grew up in Barrie. I've got my family ties and my roots here. And I left investment banking because I was not super happy with what I was doing at the time. Loved the industry, but just was craving to build something and wasn't really getting that opportunity where I was working. So I decided to leave in the summer of 2023 and hatched a plan to try out my first business. Didn't want to just kind of jump into anything. I wanted to have an aspect of passion within it, but also wanted there to be a market opportunity. I didn't just want to try business to try entrepreneurship.
Right.
But my girlfriend owns the Red Tulip here in Barrie, which is another fashion boutique in the women's side. And I was just golfing every day because I was off and didn't really have a plan yet. And she was like, "Well, why don't you come see the back end of what I do?" So I traveled down to Toronto with her and kind of watched some of the buying process and what she did in the back end of her boutique, and just kind of left that day with the feeling that there might be an opportunity here in Barrie for the menswear market. So from there, I just started digging into the market landscape, the competitors, what the market looked like here in Barrie, and saw that there was kind of a fairly large gap. The last kind of smaller men's boutique had closed like just after COVID, and I saw that no one had filled the void. And I grew up in Barrie. I've seen the growth that has happened not only on population, but just business growth, development growth, and saw that there could be a need based on all the kind of Toronto money and Toronto people coming into the city and just the vast growth that we've experienced. I saw that there could be a good opportunity for a more modern, higher end menswear store.
Very cool, man. Where's that passion come from on the fashion side?
I honestly, I probably couldn't pinpoint like one thing or one time in space that I just was into fashion. It's just always been something that I've enjoyed. I mean, living in Montreal obviously kind of helped and I think exacerbated my love for it, but it's always been something since I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. I was always kind of dressing a little different and always kind of pushing boundaries. And, people would say like, where did you find that? How are you wearing that? How are you pulling that off? So it was just always something that I kind of enjoyed and loved. And it's just taken form over the last, I guess, close to 20 years. And yeah, here we are. It's not a straight line path. Never is.
No, that's why I love asking that question on the show. Everybody's got such a unique path into getting into what they do. A lot of similarities in terms of, hey, I saw a process, I could do it better. I saw that there was a market for it. There's a void I saw, and then they come in to do their thing. But really, really, really cool path to take, and obviously wishing you all the best with that. So I haven't had too many retail stores on the show, so I'm curious to ask you: are there any like myths or misconceptions when it comes to menswear or your industry?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one for especially brick and mortar is that the industry's dead, or at least it's dying. I think a lot of people underestimate the power of brick and mortar and the power of um, human connection and connecting with your clients. I had a lot of people kind of when I was explaining the idea to friends and family. A lot of people would say, start with e-commerce, start online. The startup costs are much cheaper than building out a brick and mortar store, which is true. But my kind of angle with the brick and mortar is, if you're in e-commerce, whether you're in Barrie, whether you're in California, New York, doesn't really matter. You're competing with everybody, especially if you're a retailer and not creating your own, clothing line or your own brand. A store is a brand per se, but if you start online, you are competing with everyone. Whereas my thought with bringing a brick and mortar store, especially to Barrie, where I thought it was needed, was that you can kind of bring back that human connection that I think a lot of people were looking for post-COVID. And when you're buying pricier items, better quality items, there is an enjoyment to coming in and trying stuff on and feeling the fabrics and putting outfits together with someone who enjoys doing something like that, which you can't do online. So obviously the growth potential of e-commerce is huge, and that is a growth prospect for us in the future for sure. But I think starting at the ground level and building a client relationship in town, I think is ultimately what's going to set us apart.
I couldn't agree more. There's people out there that like the e-commerce shopping and stuff like that, but everybody's got a different shape to their body, and especially with the style like you have, in bringing different types of fabric into the men's casual and semi-casual world. I would need to come in and try it out, see how it feels. Like you said, how does that fit to the shape of my body? And trying out something custom. Plus, you always want someone else's opinion. So having an expert there who is passionate about what they do to be able to kind of help guide you through some of this stuff. I bought a bathing suit, like just something simple. I bought a bathing suit before we took a trip to Punta Cana back in April this year. And so I just did like a man shop. I was with my girlfriend. We went in and I found it. They had rubber duckies on them. So I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So I put them on. And I'm like, hey, they fit around my waist. I took them off. I bought them. Second time I put them on was last weekend, and I can't even like really lift my legs or widen my legs. Like there's not a lot of play. The material's not a stretchy fabric.
Yeah.
And so, it's more uncomfortable than it is uncomfortable. So I'm going out there happy that I have the rubber duckies, but I'm not necessarily overly comfortable in it either.
Yeah, which is like never fun, right? I mean, it's easy to like run in and run out. I mean, most men shop very fast. I've got a lot of guys that will come in here and say, hey, I've got 20 minutes. Let's put two outfits together and get me out of here, right? Which is fine. But you do want to, do a little due diligence when you're putting on your new clothes and trying stuff on, and make sure that, you're going to feel comfortable when you leave. One thing I tell a lot of customers is if you don't love it here, don't buy it, because this is the most you're going to enjoy this piece of clothing. You're always going to love it the most in store. That's when it's the newest. That's when it's the freshest. That's when you're most excited about it. So if you're kind of on the fence in the store, I typically will say, leave it on the rack. Think about it. If you can't stop thinking about it, then come back. But if you're kind of humming and hawing, if it's what you really want, chances are it's going to sit in your closet.
Totally. So when you're out, obviously being a business owner, we all know it's more than a full-time job. We're constantly working on the business or in the business, but there's a bit of a harmony, I like to call it, not necessarily a balance, because that's perfectly equal, and we tend to work a little bit more than we play. But when you're not working on or in your business, what does Logan like to do for fun?
I try to stay active. I used to be a big runner last year. Building the business this year, it's kind of tailored off quite a bit. So I still try and get out and click some Ks when I can. But it's definitely not as serious as it was last year. Aside from that, I try to stay in the gym. I try and cycle a little bit. I play a couple instruments, so that's kind of a good way to de-stress. I don't play at bars or do any shows anymore. I kind of did that growing up, but now I kind of just like to, chill out in my living room and just strum the guitar, play the piano, and just kind of relax. So those are kind of main hobbies. And then other than that, just like getting together with the friends and, have a couple drinks and just chat. I've always been a big like human connection type guy. So the more I can, sit down with friends and family and just shoot the breeze and hang out, the better.
Totally. Jeff and I are big advocates for that. There's a lot of things that the digital age took away. We are also trying to bring back, leave the world a little bit in a better place than where we found it, one day at a time. You mentioned that you were golfing a lot before you decided to open the business. You a golfer?
I am, yeah. Last year I probably got out 30, 40 times.
Nice.
That 2-month retirement phase through the summer was, helped me do that quite a bit. Yeah. I was like, I needed a break, and really I was trying to figure out what my next move was. And I would go out and play 18 or 36 holes, usually by myself during the day because everyone else was working. It was a great spot to just, think, right? You have between 4 and 8 hours, especially if you're playing by yourself. Throw some headphones in, play 2 balls, and just, contemplate what I wanted to do. So it was a good, relaxing way to kind of figure out my next steps.
When you're running, are you a long distance runner, or are you like a short distance, like 5K? Do you prefer the roads, the trails? What kind of runner are you?
Road runner for sure. This year I haven't done much over like 10K, but last year I over a 6-month span I ran a 50K and a 42.2 K run. So last year I would have described myself as a long distance runner for sure. I was anywhere between like 40 and 80K a week training. And then I did a fundraiser for breast cancer last June when I ran the 50K in Niagara. And then me and my girlfriend continued to train, and we drove out to Montreal and ran the Montreal Marathon in September. So it was quite a bit of distance over like 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, that long distance stuff is pretty crazy. My parents ran some marathons. My mom ran 2, I think, and my dad ran 3 or 4. And you look at my dad, and you'd never think he's a bit of a bigger guy, but he managed to plow through back in his mid and late 40s. I got into running in the pandemic, but I can't do more than 5K. Typically, I stick to 5K. And I prefer to run in the trails, even though there's more elevation, a little bit more going on for the mind. If I go run in the trails and then run on the road, I feel like I'm not even moving. So
on the road, yeah. It's definitely a mental game, right? But I've always found it like one of the best places to just. You don't get a whole lot of time like these days just alone to think, and especially when you're going on kind of those 2-3 hour runs, is typically where I would get some of my best like ideation and thinking done. Because I put music on, right, but it was always kind of background stuff. I was never like singing the lyrics while I was running along for a handful of hours, right? It was just kind of something that was upbeat, get your heart rate going. But I always found it a good place to just think.
Yeah, I always had a hard time putting music or throwing headphones on. Even to listen to a podcast, I needed to be free within my own mind and listen to kind of nature and what's going on out there. And then I got a 3-year-old Australian Shepherd, so he follows me through throughout the runs and nice. And that sort of thing. But definitely agree with you. Great opportunity to do some body and mind, some soul stuff, and it does wonders for the brain. Be able to escape. Like you said, we live in a super busy world, so one of the best ways to escape out there.
Yeah, I would encourage you to try something longer distance. It's a good test on the mind. Your body will typically fail at some point during especially if you're doing the marathon distances. Your body will go through some pretty wild changes over the course of 3 to 4 hours, depending on how fast you're running. But the mental learnings from being able to run for that long is it's nothing to shake a stick at. It's good for you.
Awesome. Definitely take that into consideration. So in life, we always kind of pick a path. You spoke a little bit about that path. It's never necessarily linear, and for most people, it's like the Mazda commercial. It's a zoom zoom. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Uh, we never typically start out doing that. Although some people, they know exactly what they want to do when they're super young, and they go out that, and that's what they do for their entire life. But as we go through the journey of life, it sometimes likes to throw things at us, life challenges, hardships we face as human beings, sometimes in forms of tragedies. I've always been impressed with human beings, that our ability to be able to kind of push forward through that and move forward, because we have to move forward, try to look at the glass half full, find silver linings from it. So I'm curious to ask if you've ever experienced a hardship in your life, a life challenge that, maybe you overcame that, maybe it made you better, maybe it made you stronger, maybe you took some silver linings from it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a pretty big one, and it's probably the catalyst for why I'm in this business today. About close to 2 years ago now, my mom was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. Quite aggressive. And so she had to go through the whole kind of rigmarole, chemo, radiation, surgery. Obviously a bit touch and go, when we were learning about the diagnosis. Thankfully, she's been fine. She had 100% recovery, so full remission, chemo at 100% response rate, and then surgery and radiation went swimmingly as well. So she was pretty fortunate. Our family was pretty fortunate that they were able to catch it early enough to, deal with it in obviously not the easiest fashion, right? Like, it wasn't just a quick surgery, it was about a year process, right? But they were able to catch it early enough that she's doing great. But that being said, I think, when you go through something like that, and when there is a whole lot of unknowns, always you hope for the best through the different resources that the hospitals can give you, right? But that for me was a massive change in perspective. I was kind of in this job, going through day to day, and was pretty much working for a check. The money was what it was, and I was, I guess, happy with the compensation, but wasn't happy with the job. And most days I was either complaining to her or my girlfriend, and I wasn't very happy, and just wasn't feeling overly fulfilled in my job. And having her go through that, it kind of just reminded me that life's short. You never know. Like, you could get sick tomorrow, you get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, who really knows? And I was kind of sick of spending my life doing a job that I wasn't really happy doing. And there was other things that were going on within my role that I wasn't super happy with. But that was a massive catalyst for me to just kind of be like, okay, this isn't working. I'm done here. And I kind of ended up just quitting not on a whim, but there was enough things and there was enough time, and this kind of change of perspective happened. And I'm sure to a lot of my bosses and colleagues, it felt like an overnight decision. But it just gave me a different outlook on life, and I decided, let's spend my time doing something that I enjoy. And like I said, I've always felt like I wanted to be a builder and wanted to be an entrepreneur, and wasn't getting that opportunity, and decided to make a change because of it.
Yeah, I'm with somebody who's been through that, been getting taught how to slow it down and try to live in the moment a little bit more. I'm a pretty big planner, so I like to, if you're in our inner circle of friends and you want to hang out on a Saturday, you're going to be mid-September. Like, it's a little insane. We have a good amount of friends, but not to say that it's important to kind of stop every once in a while, take a look around, and smell the flowers, so to speak, because like you said, you never know. This definitely something I'm learning. There's similarities that I have to you as well, not just in our interests, but what I've kind of experienced before I started doing what I'm doing. I was in the car business for 9 years and watched everything I'd built. We built up a business, and I was leading our team and watched it kind of crash and burn, slow financial decline. It was never always happy, especially to the end. Wasn't happy at all with, doing what we're doing, but we had built something up so much, and then just going through that kind of declining battle, uphill. You're losing every time you get out on the field to fight, so to speak, and then rolling down the hill with nothing to show for it, and then having to either rebuild in that same world or go try to do something different. So I made the decision to do what you did, and it's been way more fulfilling, and no one can bully me. So there's that.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes you get so focused on the path, you forget to ask if you're even enjoying it, right?
Yeah, and that's that kind of stop around and just do a self-assessment on your life and what's going on and what do you want, and making those decisions for yourself. What's going to make me happy. I mean, happiness it's one of the keys to life. If you're motoring through life and you're not happy, I mean, what's the point?
Absolutely, you only get one.
So what's one thing that you wish your listeners knew about your business?
It's a good question. I think the biggest thing that I want people to understand with Chasing New York is the community aspect, as well as the relationship aspect, which I've kind of touched on. One thing I didn't bring up is that so we have a barber in here as well now. So Manifest Barber, he's the gentleman who's running it has been a barber for I think 5 or 6 years, but this is kind of his first dive into entrepreneurship as well, within my store. So, really what I want to bring to Chasing New York, is not just, your average kind of retail boutique. The name kind of comes from bringing kind of higher end fashion to underrepresented communities. But it's also a song that I listened to growing up from two of my favorite artists, and it was about them kind of moving to New York and chasing their dreams and not letting anyone kind of tell you what your dream should be. And really what I want to accomplish with this is not just one store. It's bringing it to multiple different cities, specifically the ones that aren't being, represented by high fashion, and being very, very kind of client first or relationship driven. So, if people can leave this podcast with anything, we're trying to build a community in here. There's a lot of spaces, I think, for women in town, and just not enough for us gents. So really trying to build out the community for the guys.
Very nice. Well said. That was my next question, was to ask you about the business name, and you ended up answering it. So that worked out very cool. Yeah. Amazing conversation. Great opportunity to get to know you. I think our listeners definitely not only enjoyed that conversation, but there's definitely going to be some that are for sure interested and wanting to come check out your store, myself included. And so for those who are interested, what is one of the best ways that they can go ahead and reach you?
I would suggest just coming down. I'm in here most days. I've got one employee working for me right now, but there's rarely a day where I don't step foot in here. So come see us. We're at 150 Dunlop Street East. If you're not overly familiar with where that is, we're beside Bayside Variety, just a little east of Dunlop and Mulcaster.
Wonderful. Amazing stuff. Thanks again for coming on the show, and looking forward to potentially doing this down the line.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Midhurst. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpmidhurst.com. That's gnpmidhurst.com, or call 705-413-3775.